Connor, you put it best. Like there's a simple way of doing it, an in-between complexity way, and then the third one is
So, as a starting point, today we're talking about integrate to activate NetSuite and HubSpot. This is a area that we spend a lot of time on at Aptitude. I think it's one of the most common integrations that we typically see with HubSpot, and it's certainly one of the most common things that we encounter in a co-sell motion. We do a lot of work with HubSpot sales reps. So there are a lot of folks that are both NetSuite and HubSpot customers. And what we're talking about today is all of the amazing ways that you can get these systems to work together and the amazing things that you can accomplish once they're talking to each other. So to facilitate that conversation, I do have a special guest, and I'll do my intro, I guess, first, and then I'll introduce him. But for those of you that don't know me, I am Connor. I am the CEO of Aptitude. We are a HubSpot Elite Solutions partner focused on the CRM platform. So we help companies integrate, implement, and optimize the HubSpot CRM platform. And so we do a lot of NetSuite integrations, but really it's sort of the Chinese room problem of what's going on the other side. And our NetSuite expertise is really on how to get everything integrated and tied up. And so for that, I am joined by the wonderful Ryan Lee, who I will let do his own introduction so I don't steal his thunder.
appreciate it, Connor, and thank you everyone for joining today. So my name is Ryan Lee. I'm the head of product here at Nova Module, where I'm responsible for our company's product strategy and vision around all things integration. Nova Module specializes in digital transformation for SMBs and enterprise. We have about a decade of experience with our most popular cloud technologies, such as NetSuite, which we'll be talking about today. But we also work very closely and partners of Stripe and different types of iPaaS solutions, such as Soligo. A little bit of a quick snippet about my career. So my career has essentially been dedicated to building data-driven integrations across various industries that I'd worked in, whether it was in logistics, web development, IT operations, or business intelligence. Super excited today to have this conversation here with Connor and hopefully be able to give you guys some good knowledge and sharing some good tips around how to handle your integrations.
Awesome. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me today. And in terms of sort of the breadth of what we are going to talk about, so today we're going to be talking about CRM versus ERP. I think one of the more common conversations that we have, especially folks that don't work with these systems every day, is really understanding the difference between those two platforms, those two products. What do you use each for? And I think one of the common things we run into is people trying to find a way to make their CRM into an ERP, or people that have built their ERP into a CRM and are trying to find a way out of that problem. So we'll talk a little bit about the difference between those. We'll also do a little bit of an intro on NetSuite. We aren't doing a NetSuite demo. We aren't going super in depth there. If you want to do some of those things, I'm sure we can find folks that would be happy to do that for you. We'll then talk about different ways to integrate with NetSuite. And if you don't use NetSuite, but you are a HubSpot customer, some of these will be applicable to regardless of which ERP you might be looking at. We're going to think through ways in which you might want to approach a different integration method. And then we're going to go through a couple of use cases. So we're actually going to talk about a marketing use case, a sales use case, a CS work use case, and go through a couple of different ways that you can leverage this data in really actionable and meaningful ways once you get them tied together. So with that, we're going to jump into the first level question, which is one that we encounter all of the time, which is what is a CRM and what is an ERP and when does each thing do what? I think one of the most common questions that I get from new consulting hires that have always worked in a CRM background and are maybe new to ERP is like, so I don't want to sound dumb and I'm going to ask you directly, but like, what does ERP mean? And Ryan's going to tell us about that. But before we get there, when we talk about CRM, really what CRM is designed for is how do we house and manage all of the different customers, the prospects we work with, the interactions that we've had with them? How do we conduct and do our sales management? Where do we track and manage what deals we're doing? How do we report on the efficacy of our sales function? How do we manage all of our different marketing automation functions? So what do we communicate with customers, our emails, our web experience? How do we interact with those customers? Increasingly customer service and support. So once we have customers that are active and live, how do we onboard them? How do we service them? How do we support them? How do we engage with them? And then ultimately a lot of that customer insights and analytics on who are our customers, what services and products have we sold to them, where are they at in their buying journey and in their relationship and their life cycle with us, And when we really think about and talk about CRM, that goes what goes in there. And really for us, we think about CRM as primarily kind of Salesforce, HubSpot, Dynamics as kind of the big three. If you're using something that's not one of those, I would question if that's the right choice. Obviously, we're big HubSpot fans here, and with that, that's sort of how we think about those pieces. So, Ryan, tell us about ERPs and why I would use an ERP and what it is for, and what ERPs I might be familiar with or have heard of.
Yeah, thanks, Connor. So ERP at first, it's a enterprise resource planning platform. So ERPs are very important specifically for the back end of a business. The key bullet points here, whether it's internal business operations, finance, accounting, supply chain, inventory, manufacturing, those are all things that happen on the back end of a business. A lot of times, it might not seem as exciting as, sales or marketing, but they're just as important. And it's really, really key to have an ERP on the back end to manage all of that, right? You have all these other departments that need to work together. So having an ERP will really bring those together, give you the right insights, keep things well oiled, efficient and whatnot. Some of the most popular ERPs, like the one that we're talking about today, NetSuite, can be used by all sorts of businesses. They could be mom and pop, small to medium sized in revenue, and even on the enterprise side. So ERPs today aren't necessarily for just the largest companies. It can really be leveraged across all sizes of different companies and ranges. On the ERP side, there are a lot of other softwares out there outside of NetSuite, right? Oracle in itself that owns NetSuite has a lot of different solutions. Microsoft Dynamics, they all have other types of ERPs that they offer. So, depending on your size of business, you can definitely find a range of options, and some of them are geared towards particular industries as well.
I think something that you just touched on that I thought was really applicable is, I think the simplest way to think about this is CRM is really the technology supporting your front of house. And then what Ryan sort of touched on of ERP is really that back of house. And we love a good restaurant metaphor at A8. So I'll latch onto that one as a good way to understand it.
Absolutely. All right, so let's dive a little deeper into the NetSuite side of things. For those of you who are not as familiar with the ERP or NetSuite, it is owned by Oracle. What is very interesting about NetSuite, for businesses when they first start off, I think typically companies will be using, out of the box QuickBooks. And the analogy that I have is typically you could look at QuickBooks as your basic calculator, while NetSuite is your scientific calculator. As your business evolves, as you start actually hiring people in certain departments to take that on full time and their roles, that's where NetSuite as an ERP can really come into play, because it doesn't just tackle the finance or the accounting. You start to really plan out, the manufacturing, the distribution channels, and there's a lot more that goes into it. So overall, the end-to-end capabilities, again, on NetSuite side is the focus is on finance and accounting, but when it comes to inventory, order management, order allocation, when you're selling on Shopify, TikTok, Instagram, and all these other sales channels like Amazon, you need an ERP to really help control everything and give visibility across every department. So the benefits of NetSuite really is to streamline your workflows, improve that visibility, and ultimately to make data-driven decisions. Today, we have so much data at our fingertips. Sometimes it's actually hard to make good use of it, but NetSuite is structured and built in a way that really helps you get through that process. NetSuite also is used across various industries. It's not just about manufacturing or wholesale distribution. They have a very, very big market with software sales, SaaS-based companies, and even healthcare.
Something that I would call out just as you run through that is, I think something that we see more and more often, especially as we see CRMs getting deeper into the finance and the payment stack with things like Commerce Hub, is that we see more and more organizations sort of delaying any investment or shift ERP, trying to do more and more on CRM in the short term. And I think one of the biggest indicators that maybe you should start looking to more of the ERP side is when you're trying to force things into your CRM and you think like, man, all these businesses do this. Like, why is this part so hard for us? And I think one of the most common answers is really CRM is not designed or built to be an ERP technology. And we often find the most successful folks that we work with are sort of doing a lot of stuff in ERP, doing a lot of stuff in CRM, and then sort of intelligently figuring out what to pass across each system and sort of get kind of the best of both worlds. With that, what might make sense is for us to talk about integration options. How do you get these things to connect? How do you get them to talk to each other? And we have a whole bunch of different methods and ways that you can kind of approach this if you're sort of new to getting these systems integrated and talking to each other. So for our first one, and definitely the most basic, and we're going to kind of ratchet up in complexity from here. HubSpot does have an out-of-the-box integration with NetSuite. So it's in their HubSpot data sync. It's supported by HubSpot. It is very basic and it can do some fundamental things for you. So we see some customers do this for taking an order and sending it into NetSuite and creating a customer, and it can do sort of this one directional flow. And then you can configure sync fields also. There are a fair number of limitations to those sync fields. If you ever tried to set this up, you probably encountered them pretty quickly. But as you're getting some of those, there is an out-of-the-box sync. That's a great place to start and really understand and help understand sort of what the breadth of what you want to integrate is, and then really inform the conversation as you get to things that are a little bit deeper. Candidly, we do not have any customers that are actively, consistently running on this, though almost every customer that we do this work with starts here. So it's a good place to start, but I would expect you to outscale it really quickly simply because ERP is complex. And if you're really trying to figure out how to integrate CRM and ERP, you are probably a level above and beyond this out-of-the-box functionality kind of right out the gate. And so with that, there are a whole bunch of other options, and I'll let Ryan sort of introduce us to one of the first ones that you might want to look towards.
Yeah, and Connor, like you mentioned, ERPs can be very complex, and every business has a different business requirement as they're going through these integrations. So it's really important that you take that into consideration as you're evaluating these different integration methods. So one of the other integration approaches is through the NetSuite Suite Apps, which is the NetSuite marketplace of applications. This also includes the previous HubSpot data sync that Connor mentioned in the previous slide. But it also adds in some of the other vendors and partners that also build integrations between HubSpot and NetSuite. So again, depending on your use case, you might be using the default out of the box, or you could be using a third-party partner there. The benefits of these NetSuite Suite apps is that, number one, they are specifically designed for NetSuite. These are usually vendors that are verified on the NetSuite partnership program, which, it takes a bit of work to be a partner. So you're not just working with some random developer who built an app and hopefully it threw it onto the Suite App Marketplace. There's a lot of validation to this process. So from an ERP perspective, the workflows and the complexities are usually taken into consideration. The nice thing about these Suite apps too is that they're usually pretty straightforward in terms of implementation and installation, meaning that the configuration screens could be someone that is on the accounting or finance team. It doesn't necessarily require an engineer to come in and configure everything. So there's a lot of benefits to that when you're thinking about that integration path for you as a business. Do you only have accounting people, or do you have an engineer or someone in IT that can assist in that integration? What you might run into some cons, like Connor mentioned the previous one, is that it doesn't really cover all of the custom requirements. So depending on how you want to manage your integrations and how things change, in terms of you growing from direct to consumer to business to business model or wholesale model, how does that scale with your business? So that's kind of the gist of the NetSuite Suite apps. And then this next one here is about third-party iPaaS. So iPaaS is integration platform as a service. It's become more and more popular over the past decade here. Just to give you a quick stat, as I was looking at it, back in 2016, the iPaaS market was about 575 million. By 2030, we're expecting it to be about 50 billion. So we're seeing that integrations are just becoming more and more important to the success of businesses across the board for every department. So where iPaaS comes in is that, they focus on more than just one endpoint to another endpoint integration, meaning HubSpot to NetSuite. In the complex world of running your business, you might need HubSpot, NetSuite, plus one additional source of data. That could be Shopify, it could be Stripe, and you need to append that data to ultimately run your workflows. So what an iPaaS as a third party can do is give you that ability to set up these integrations in a user-friendly, pre-built template or product solution. It's almost like a quick start for your integration. Now, unlike the suite apps in the previous two slides, it gives you a little more customization. So if you did need to add a slight script here and there, you would be able to do that. So typically, I would say someone that's running an iPaaS, they're a business analyst, they're an IT or systems administrator. They might not necessarily need to be a full stack developer, but they have some idea about the technical sides of things. And they can interface and work with your departments, whether it's finance or accounting, to get these integrations completed. Some of the most popular examples of iPaaS would be Celigo, Make, Boomi, and Zapier. And they range from all various sizes of functionality, features, and workflows.
Something that I would note as you talk about that is I think that this is one of the best options. I think, and we're kind of graduating through levels of complexity here, right? But if you have no RevOps team, if you have no ops team, if you have nothing really dedicated to making your tools and systems work and harmoniously sort of sync together, maybe that out of the box sort of first one is a good look. And then you might graduate up to something with maybe slight configurability. And when you get into more of an iPaaS solution, the best part about this is that ideally you don't need any development support to make it work, but you do need some level of technical and RevOps expertise in your organization in order to sort of pursue that type of a connection. But the good news is you don't need a ton of development. You maybe don't need third-party expertise and support if you have a team internally, though. Using somebody that has a lot of knowledge on the specific iPaaS platform you're working with definitely helps, or maybe technical integration support for some of the technologies that you're connecting. But all of those are really good options. That takes us to sort of our highest level sort of approach to this problem, which is doing everything custom. And we have some customers that decide to go down this route. The primary reason that is it's super customizable. You can really do whatever you want, and you can build anything with any APIs that are available, and you can kind of make it all work together. And you can get really optimized and tailored to a very specific use case. So if you have different departments at different rev rec models, maybe multiple products, multiple business units, you start to kind of outscale basic configurability, and you really need something custom and really robust. Cons is with any custom integration that anyone ever does, you are going to have a really big, significant development effort to get something up and running and working. You're going to need technical expertise, not only on sort of a platform and a technology, but on the thing that you guys have built custom, which means that can be sort of expensive to maintain, and kind of continuous updates and improvements, especially as you see, and as we see with a lot of integration solutions, is that the core platforms themselves, whether it's a HubSpot or a NetSuite or anything else that might be in your stack, they're pushing updates to their APIs, their infrastructure, the way that they're doing things. And so you kind of need to maintain both of those. And as they're constantly moving, we typically caution people against this approach, and we really look at it as kind of this is absolutely an option. You can absolutely do it. We've helped companies do it before, but you can kind of get yourself into sticky situations that hurt long term, where you kind of need constant managed IT services in order to make something function. So when you're thinking through some of this, Ryan, how should you sort of approach what the best way to solve this problem is for your organization? I think that we inadvertently talked about a bunch of this, but if you were to synopsize that.
Yeah, we kind of gave 3 to 4 different approaches to how you could integrate, right? And I think, Connor, you put it best. Like, there's a simple way of doing it, an in-between complexity way, and then the third one is, fully custom. I think when you first kind of think about your integration, really focusing on the requirements for you as a business and how complex are those needs. A lot of times what we find is a business might come to us and say, hey, I need to integrate A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Then we dive a little deeper into the why behind that. And then they realize, you know what, I actually only need to do A and B. So understanding that will really reduce or refine kind of what that complexity of needs are. As I mentioned in the iPad slide, if you come to it and say, hey, I need HubSpot and NetSuite, but I also need 3 other endpoints of data to really help me with my marketing campaigns and these different use cases. Those are things that you really want to consider on the complexity and need side. And then for every business, you really have to consider the resource availability. Do you have people who are working for you as contractors, full-time employees? Are they in the engineering space, or are these data analysts, or just accounting, finance people? So considering your resources and who's going to own this is extremely important, because again, someone who is installing the Suite app or the HubSpot data sync in NetSuite, that could be, a CFO, that could be a controller who is administrated on the NetSuite side. But someone who's dealing with the iPaaS platform, it's probably more of a data analyst or a systems administrator. So those are things that you really need to consider as a business of who you want to hire, because not every business wants to grow the IT department, right? They might want to outsource that. The third one here on the budget side, just as important as everything else, right? How much do you want to spend? When it comes to iPaaS systems, the cost there can balloon pretty quickly if you're thinking bigger picture, right? You're not just talking about 2 endpoint integration. You might be looking at 10, 15, 20. So understanding what your one-time fees are versus subscription fees are extremely important. And that's where the custom integrations sometimes, have a benefit, because you're not necessarily paying these recurring subscription fees from an integration perspective on the product subscriptions. You might have an engineer who can build it and have that solution sustained for several years to come. And then the other things are looking at scalability. How fast is your business and your systems growing? The benefit, again, of the pre-built solutions is you have these other partners and companies who are well-versed at building these apps, but they're also managing and maintaining these apps for you. In today's world, APIs are refreshing constantly. You can see Shopify's change logs, like every 3 months, there's something new. Every developer then needs to catch up to that. So scalability is very, very important, something to consider. And then lastly, data sync requirements. How often do you need that data going back and forth? A lot of business use cases don't require you to have a daily sync or even an hourly sync. You might be able to get away with syncing once a week or once a month. Going back to that beginning bullet point of complexity of needs, driving home what your requirements are and really focusing on that will help you understand, how often do you need to sync data? And then from there, you can dive into which integration path is best for you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for breaking that down. I want to get into our favorite part of anything that we do, which is actual practical use cases and what you can do if you guys get this all set up and ready to work. And we're going to go through a couple of these for each one of these categories. So we're going to kick it off with marketing use cases of what you might do with some of this data. And so Ryan, I realize that you just gave us a ton of amazing insight, but I might pick on you first, because this was one of the ones that you had recommended of types of things that you can do if you get this stuff integrated in.
Absolutely. And like Hunter said, this is the fun part, getting the data back and forth. That's really the operational side of things. What can you do with the data is really where it gets exciting. This first one is a customer win-back campaign. So integrating HubSpot and NetSuite can be very powerful, because NetSuite tends to store a lot of that back-end data on the customers and their transactions. And inside of the ERP itself, there could be predictive analytics stored inside of there. So getting data from a NetSuite ERP, such as, whether a customer is high value, low value, a high risk of churn and whatnot, and pushing that back into HubSpot can be very helpful when you're delivering these customer win-back campaigns.
One of the other ones that we talk about, and I think where we see this being really valuable, is that customer segmentation and being able to create a lot of that analysis right in CRM, especially on HubSpot on the marketing side. One of the things that we find most often with customers is that they, especially marketing leaders, are going into their payment system, their billing system, ERP. They're making requests from finance. They're trying to get segmentation on who's bought what or ordered which things and where that data came from and how they can use that to segment and activate those customers. And Winback's kind of one examples of those, but we see a lot of engagement with folks on how do we do upsell or cross-sell campaigns? How do we power these different experiences, and being able to sync back what products people have actually purchased, what the status of their orders are, being able to kind of know what's going on with those customers and segment them by that data allows you to sort of have much more effective go-to-market campaigns enriched by all of that back-end ERP data. And I think what we see a lot of organizations early in their life cycle do is that they're sort of structured on that initial customer activation function. And then once they have that customer, they aren't spending a lot of time on re-engaging, cross-selling, expanding the relationship with that customer because they don't have access to the data that would help them do that. So there's a very good use case that it should immediately speak to. If you have ERP and you have CRM, the efficacy with which you can pursue this is really low until and when you get them fully integrated. Okay, let's jump to sales. So we talked a little bit about on the marketing side, and usually what we see, and I actually think that this is changing these days, is that organizations from we should get our systems integrated and our data connected start on the marketing side. And once they sort of get more into the sales function, we start to see a lot of these different pieces. So Ryan, if you want to kick us off with this particular use case.
Yeah, absolutely. So from a reporting perspective, as we mentioned earlier, within the HubSpot or CRM arena, a lot of times you have sales and marketing folks in there. You don't necessarily want them in your ERP. Your ERP, again, is more for the back office, right? Finance, accounting, and inventory and whatnot. So having the data to be able to sync between both systems is extremely important, because finance and accounting might actually want to report on revenue recognition, while sales is more about realized revenue, right? The salespeople want to see, what are our commissions? When am I going to get paid out? To be able to actually understand what the realized revenue is in the reporting within the CRM is so important. It's a good indicator for the salesperson to see, how they're performing and how much more they need to push to meet their goals. So again, this is a very, very important report here that you would want to push back into your CRM, backed by the ERP data.
Something I'll touch on here, and we talk about this a lot before we get into some of our inventory stuff, is one of the things that we find, especially in organizations that are early in kind of building out their RevOps infrastructure, is that they are trying, the numbers that they're reporting on from the sales side and from the finance side are different. And then they're spending a lot of time trying to reconcile and figure out what's right. This really gets you that single source of truth, giving you actual what's been realized and what's been sold, and sort of merging those together helps with things like clawbacks, helps with sort of all of those different sales operations functions that you start to run into when you sort of have more and more scale and infrastructure. Okay, inventory and pricing data. This is something that we see all of the time. The most common industry that we run into this is kind of on the manufacturing side, with the primary reason just being number of SKUs and the volume of things that they're working with. But where we also see this is in organizations that maybe have prices that change really frequently because they have different inputs, they have different vendors, they have different suppliers, or they have inventory that's moving and changing. And what we often see when organizations is they both have a sales function that's actively in market and selling things direct, but then they may have a different mechanism by which people can purchase and buy things. And so the inventory, the CRM is the source of truth for inventory. And HubSpot doesn't really have an amazing way out of the box to track and manage a lot of that inventory function. And so all of that data is going to be on the ERP side. Being able to sync that back in and being able to report on it, segment by it, be able to have that in front of your sales team means you're selling things to people that you actually have in stock. You're selling things at the right price for each one of the things that you're actually packaging and putting into deals, versus slinging out, new things and finding out the pricing has actually changed because we have different vendor inputs or something has changed on the ERP side. So really, really powerful use case to unlock your sales team, improve your data consistency, and really make sure everyone's operating off the right information. And this one I know is basic, but I think it's a good one. And we touched on it a little bit at the top end, but I think that this is one of the most powerful ones and for out of the box integration is pretty good. But Ryan, I'll let you speak to this particular piece.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in this example here within the CRM itself, you have a closed won deal. And having an integration that automates that transaction in the ERP is so important because of the operational aspects of it, right? The salesperson wants to get paid as soon as possible for closing that deal. It's exciting for them. But the fulfillment and the shipping teams and the inventory teams also want to know, how many orders have been placed recently, because that really impacts them on the purchasing side. Do they need to replenish inventory? Do they need to get those items out? Do they need to make sure the warehouse is stocked properly? So it's very, very important to be able to get these close-along deals into the ERP as soon as possible with the minimal delay.
All right, let's talk service and success use cases. And I think one of the things that we're finding more and more organizations do is making sure that they're bringing their success and their service teams under one CRM house. And it gives them sort of, if you do this data integration, you make these things work, having your success team in the same CRM platform that your sales and your marketing team works out of means you have one really go-to-market function and really see CS as a core part of that. So one of the first use cases we want to talk through here is service history. So being able to know, and what we see for organizations, especially anyone who has physical products, right? Think about things like warranty repairs. Think about anything that you have shipments or anything going out to those individual customers, or field service that's running out and you're sort of piping that back. Being able to have visibility into that allows you to sort of run both this kind of inside support use case as well as your field service use case and still have full visibility and kind of that customer 360 view on everything that's going on with those individual customers. And so having that service history is going to go a really long way, and being able to pull those back in, log them as tickets, and then you both have tickets that originate in the CRM platform and sort of those service use cases, and then also the tickets and the service experience that might be happening on that back end, and really making sure you have that single view of the customer. Something that we saw recently with sort of a customer we worked with is they have both their service team that's operating out of the CRM platform inside of HubSpot, engaging with that customer. And then there's sort of the finance and the ops team that also has a service experience with that customer, and they're not clear on what's happening on either side. And, best case scenario, maybe they step on each other's toes. Worst case, they're sort of solving the same customer issue twice and giving different sort of outcomes. And so being able to align those goes a really, really long way.
Absolutely, Connor. And another great example is subscription renewals, being able to automate the marketing and transactional emails that you send out to your customers, knowing that the ERP is holding a lot of the data around the actual finance and accounting, but also the fulfillment process of these orders. So being able to pass that data from the ERP back into the CRM is so essential for you to be able to automate that subscription renewal communication. So at the end of the day, like you mentioned earlier, you don't want departments stepping over one another. You might have client success who's talking to the client. You might have finance who's also talking to the client. You want to really be able to automate as much of that communication as possible, yet still give that visibility on the service history as well.
All right. So for our last CS example, we want to talk about account health. I think that the simplest version of this could be something like, how much have they paid? Are they up to date on a lot of their payments? Something that we encounter in our own organization as we try to manage a lot of this is that when we have disputes or success criteria for customers, or maybe there's sort of a negotiation on an additional contract or sort of a change order, it's super important for our success agents and the people working on those customers to have visibility into, is this customer paid up on bills? Do we have a ton of exposure, right? You can have the most simple version of this of just giving you an account health on, what total amount that has been invoiced to this customer is maybe overdue, past payments, or anything else. But you can really make this score a composite between both ERP level data that might include their financial relationship or anything else you're sort of tracking and managing on the ERP side. We talked a little bit about sort of service and shipping and some of the other components there, but then also the CRM side and really integrating those two data sets, bringing them together and really helping you get a clearer view of what is going on in that organization. And so account health is something that when you score and you enrich it, and there's even just today, there's new updates on some of the scoring functionality in HubSpot. And if you have that data in from your ERP, you can really blend a lot of it together and make something really, really cool. All right, we're going to do a little bit of Q&A, and I have some of these that were pre-submitted, but if you are attended and you are in our audience, please let us know. We're happy to take, and we'll monitor a whole bunch of the other chats of questions that y'all might have on a couple of different things, and what might work. First question that I've got here, and Ryan, I'll probably kick this one to you, which is, if you have HubSpot and NetSuite integrated, should your back office teams work primarily in NetSuite, or can they start operating in HubSpot? And where do you see those back office teams actually working?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of it is dependent on how your organization works. What we find is that the NetSuite back office side works really well for supply chain and finance and accounting. But there are certain functions around the CRM where those responsibilities and roles can be shared, meaning that if it's someone in customer service, they don't necessarily need to work out of the NetSuite back office. They might be able to actually leverage HubSpot through the automations, the notifications and whatnot, and also looking at, the general account history of the customer there. And that's why the integration is essential and so powerful, is that it does allow you as a business to make that decision. Would you rather have your team members logging into HubSpot, or would you rather, pay licenses fees on the NetSuite side? But the restrictions are, I think, a lot larger when you come to the NetSuite side, because you have to make sure that customer service reps don't have access to certain inventory numbers or certain finance numbers. So the platform in itself might have a little bit more sensitive data on the ERP side.
I would echo all of that. The one thing I will say is we have seen some finance teams and some workflows actually be deployed in HubSpot particularly well, whether it's like collections or some kind of like an AP flow, and you sort of leverage some of the sales and marketing functionality that's in there. But I think to Ryan's point, the more that you can, I would say one of the biggest indicators is, and you'll find with your finance and your ops folks, like they're very at home in something like a NetSuite. This makes sense to them. They feel like they're getting sort of the right tooling versus when they're kind of managing in a CRM, they're like, wait, what is this? What's going on? I think the more you can keep your back office teams and the tools that are designed for them, the more of a positive experience you're going to have across the organization. For another one of these, which maybe I'll take a first pass, and then I might just tee you up, Brian, which is, when is the right time for a company to upgrade to an ERP from a simpler commerce solution? You already talked about QuickBooks, but like a Stripe or a Commerce Hub and HubSpot payments and maybe some of those more basic functions. I think I'll sort of speak from what we've seen, which is really the biggest indicator to us is when we start having less sort of, how do I enable commerce with my customer conversations, and more accounting and FP&A and some of these other components that start to outstrip what some of those tools kind of are capable of. And you start to see that you need more of that function. I think at the top end, Ryan, you had talked about like when you build a department, when you have a team for that. What's sort of the indicator on your side of, hey, you really might want to start looking to ERP?
Yeah, a lot of times when, you have the initial solutions for your business, you don't necessarily immediately jump to an ERP as solving that problem. You might actually look at it as like, hey, what else can we integrate to HubSpot? It might be a third-party app that's good for demand planning, a third-party app that's good for inventory, right? So you might explore those solutions first. And once you start hitting those bottlenecks, that's when you really start making that move to the ERP. Another really big indicator typically for companies is when they start really thinking about compliance for their business. And ERP is really going to help a business to scale, stay compliant in their industry and their vertical. So that's always a big indicator that you need to start graduating to an ERP.
Fantastic. Well, with that, we'll start to wrap a little bit on what this looks like. And if you were here and you're interested in anything that's going on, if you need HubSpot help, if you need NetSuite help, if you need Stripe help, for either of us, for Aptitude on anything from the HubSpot side, feel free to reach out to us. Give us a follow on LinkedIn, anything else. And for the Nova module team, I think Ryan would stay very much the same. Please reach out to him. Check out the Nova module site. We would love to help you if these are the kind of the problems that you're starting to run into. And Ryan, the breadth of you guys is really integrations writ large too. So yes, you guys have a lot of expertise on NetSuite and Stripe and everything else. But if you're looking to integrate with stuff, the Nova module team kicks ass. I would recommend it. Thank you everybody so much for spending the time with us, and give us a shout, connect with us. We'd be more than happy to help you.